Memes is asking about thoughts about the future of education. You know, it's interesting that I have to say this is an area that for me is evolving slightly week by week. And it'll evolve a bit more as I understand really what it takes to use LLMs in education. Because the thing that is, I would say that the first thing to say, which I think I've said before here, is the extreme specialization of many kinds of education, I kind of think is increasingly self-defeating. And the thing which is increasingly important in education is kind of to be able to think broadly. And by the way, an important piece of modern thinking is kind of computational thinking. Computation is sort of this great paradigm of our century. And that's the thing that is kind of the formal foundations that you can use to kind of build a tower of thinking that goes beyond just the I thought this, then I thought this, then I thought this. It's the thing that allows you to sort of build a solid tower. Mathematics has the same characteristic. Computation is a much more general story for that. Plus, when you've built something computationally, like in Wolfram language or something, you have the capability of take this thing I built computationally and feed it to a computer and have the computer help me make progress with that. And I think one thing that better be part of the future of education is people really learning computational language, really learning the ideas, the concepts of computation as they have been convinced to learn the concepts of mathematics over the past 1,000 years or so. And I think that better be part of the future of education, because it is the great paradigm of our times and the thing that really allows kind of to go beyond just the human common sense discussion, to build something formal that, by the way, we now have computers that can help us make progress with it. But I would say the thing that to me is sort of interesting right now is, there's different modes of education. I mean, there's a lecture is being given, people hear the lecture. There is, and that has value, particularly if the lecture is good and, all those kinds of things. There's also the sort of the personalized education thing. I was, somebody was asking me very recently actually, what my learning style is. And I think the choices were kind of reading or listening, of, just go read the book or listen to the lecture type thing. And I realized that I'm terribly spoiled, because an important mode of learning for me is neither of those. It's what I might call asking. And, when I try to learn about some field, well, I'll read a certain amount of stuff. I prefer reading to watching videos and things. That's just a personal preference, and probably also a feature of a sort of a form factor of my life, because I'm not a person. I don't commute to work and things like that. I don't have a time when I'm readily able to listen to stuff and so on. But for me, the number one way, the 0th way to learn things is to have a project related to those things. And that's kind of usually the driver for me of learning anything. And that's an important piece of kind of what motivates and defines what I want to learn. But I would say that the other part of it, which is the spoiled part, is the asking part of learning things, which is, often I'll seek out some expert in some particular area and I'll just ask them a bunch of things. And the thing that, it's often, I hope, fun on both sides, because often the things I'm asking are things that come from an attempt to kind of foundationally understand some field, and they're a little different than anybody's going to ask if they're not really trying to drill down to the foundations. But my mode has been, you ask a person, you get responses in real time to the questions you're asking and so on. And so now the question is, how can that be generalized? Do LLMs let us generalize that idea so that a much broader range of people can do that sort of personalized asking style of education? And I think the answer will be yes. I mean, I think what one has to do, and this is what we've done with, well, the first step is the OpenAI Wolfram plugin ChatGPT is kind of, you have to back the linguistic interface that's provided by the LLMs with sort of hard content, so to speak, and hard computation. It's the linguistic interface and the kind of common sense of LLMs doesn't take you the full distance, but it does give you this kind of rich linguistic interface, which allows things to happen that I think will make it much more feasible to do sort of personalized tutoring, education, and so on. I mean, it's even the very basic aspect of, you're teaching a kid math or something, and you want them to understand, I don't know, fractions or something like this, and you formulate some scenario that involves their favorite kind of animal doing something amusing, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's got a lot of words, but it's somehow engaging. And if you can, I don't know how well this will work, but it's certainly something interested in, is can you couch the question in terms that, for whatever reason, a kid will resonate with and will care about, and will be, not thinking, that's some abstract math thing, I'll never relate that to anything I do. But as soon as you relate it to, I don't know, collecting Pokemons or something, or whatever it is that somebody does, and you can do that in a decently engaged way, they'll think, no, let me not get into Pokemons because I know nothing about them. But I'll give you an example. A kid, one of mine actually, who really was not into sort of learning arithmetic, except that was interested in business. And so turns out anytime there was a sort of arithmetic computation that involved dollars, yes, that was immediately interesting and related, and 15% of this, yep, we could work that out. But the abstract, 15% of some abstract number, just never really engaged, was that interested in that. So that's a case where, if the LLM can couch the sort of the raw math in terms that are relatable to some kid, for example, then that's already something. The next issue is, this is sort of the first time in history where it's possible for a machine to understand the working that somebody goes through. I mean, yes, usually it's been like, well, get an answer. Okay, we can tell you if the answer is right or not. But if you show all your working, mostly machine is just like, I don't know what's going on here. Now we have a mechanism where you can actually understand that. You can have a machine understand that, just as you can have a machine understand something about how you're building up a piece of code you're writing. And so I think the analysis of working, the analysis of a thought process, or even the description of a thought process, kid gives answer, machine says, why do you think it's that? The kid types something, or probably later says something, and the machine can really give an analysis of that. And I think that, and that's interesting. And I think the machine will gradually build up an effective model of what's happening for the kid, for the learner. And I would strongly expect that it will be possible for machine to preemptively explain things in a way that is appropriate for that particular person. I mean, I know for myself, for example, this is again one of these sort of spoilt admissions, is, lots of stuff comes in for me and I don't necessarily have a chance to read it, but there's people who work with me who will have a chance to read it, and those people know how to explain stuff to me. It's like, yes, we can have some whole elaborate story about some new, I don't know, AI development or something, and there's a way that I have of understanding things, and based on stuff I've worked on and know about and so on. And there are, I have people working with me who are pretty good at explaining to me, oh, that's, it's like a multi-way system that's doing this, that, and the other. That explanation will be useless to many people, but for me, because it plugs into things I already know, it's like, okay, I get it. Then or this business model is like this other company that I know. Okay, I get it. So I think the same will be true for everybody with kind of LLM-based education, that it will be much easier to present new ideas to somebody in a way that relates to the things they already know, and is sort of a good presentation for them that may be different from a good presentation for somebody else. So I think, I see that as being quite successful, and I think what I would imagine is that there's, do there need to be humans in the loop? Almost certainly, yes. I mean, particularly, I would say, maybe less so at the very early stages of education, but later on, I kind of think for most people that having a human sort of care about, interact with, etc., having a human who is sort of expressing the value of the thing that's being learnt is pretty important to people. I mean, there are people, sometimes like myself, who are sufficiently self-motivated to learn things. It doesn't matter whether there's a human who loves the subject and is going to explain it to me in a very enthusiastic way. I don't care. If I'm enthusiastic enough about it, I'm just going to drill down and learn that stuff. And certainly people get into that kind of situation, but I would say that a much more common situation is there's a teacher who's very passionate about some subject, and that passion kind of rubs off on students who then get motivated to learn that subject. And I think that that particular loop is probably a worthwhile one that that will sort of keep humans in there. But when that isn't available, and even in the mechanics of learning things, I'm fairly confident that this sort of this kind of personalized approach to education is finally now, very surprisingly, something that will be possible. I mean, people have been talking about adaptive learning systems for 40 years, maybe even 50 years, and they've usually been a bust. They've usually really not worked. I mean, they've been very sort of, they've got a big map of different things that one might learn about, and they've got different, paths that one can follow, but it really isn't, and they do something, but it isn't, it's not the magic that one might hope it would be. And perhaps there will be more magic. Now, I have to say, in sort of criticism of what I'm saying, whenever there's a new technology, from movies to television to computers to all these things, one of the things people say about it at first is, oh, it'll be so great for education. It's sort of a repeated statement about every new technology. And sometimes it pans out, usually it doesn't. I kind of think this one is different, but we'll see. And I kind of think this ability to sort of really relate the educational content to the student is going to be important.